my name is Beck and welcome to my recent reads reading wrap up. I'm going to be talking about the books that I have read from the months of August all the way to September. First up, I have Nine from the Nine Worlds by Rick Riordan. Rick Riordan is one of my favourite authors. I love his books, so naturally I ended up really enjoying this one. This is the novella installment for after the Magnus Chase trilogy has finished, and I loved the Magnus Chase trilogy. I didn't think that I would like it after giving the first book like a 3.5, 3 stars, but the series only grew for me and I absolutely adored it, and that is why I picked this one up, because I just needed more from these characters in this world. This was comprised of a bunch of short stories, and obviously it's a novella, it's very short. I don't usually go for short stories, but I was actually genuinely surprised that I liked all of them in this book. All of the characters that Rick has written stand out as unique and being themselves with their own motivations, and I think that's why I liked this one so much, because I could really see them coming through in this story as well. Obviously I thought that Magnus would be in this story, but he wasn't. It was all of the side characters, and I did really want more of Alex and Magnus in this, but that didn't happen, so that's really my only downside to this novella bind-up. This was a fun book. It had great pop culture references, it made me smile, and I gave it about a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. Next up, I read Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff, and this is one of my rarer ratings for this year. I haven't been giving out many 5 out of 5 star ratings, but obviously I did for this one. I love this series so much. I thought I was going to absolutely bawl at the end of this book, because Jay kept retweeting and sharing all of his fans' reactions, and so many people were crying, and I was like, oh no, this is going to absolutely destroy me, but I was surprisingly okay at the end. I didn't cry, I was sad. Obviously I'm not going to say what the ending was. There was a part closer to the ending that made me cry a little bit. I shed some tears over this book, but I didn't absolutely bawl. So I'm disappointed that I didn't bawl, but it was still a 5-star book. I really want to talk about this, but I can't obviously say spoilers for the series. I really liked and respected the choices that Jay made in this. I liked the twist to the narrative that he did, because Nevernight, if you don't know, is written by somebody in this world, and you find out the depth of that in this, and I really liked the way he did it. It kept me on my toes as I was reading, and I like the way that everything unfolded. It did surprise me, and I liked that it did that. I can't speak about this too much more without spoiling it, so I'm just going to leave it at that. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't read Nevernight, please jump on and read it, even if you think it might not be your thing. It's got such a sarcastic core. It is so easy to fall in love with these characters. It's so easy to understand them. Mia takes no crap, and that's why I love her as a protagonist. In conclusion, please read Nevernight so that you can read God's Grave, and then you can read Dark Dawn, and then you can talk to me about it, because that would be great. I would love to talk spoilers with you. Next up, I read a book, and I've actually unhauled this, so I talked about this more in a reading vlog that I did. It was like a self-imposed reading vlog, because I wanted to hold myself accountable for my quarterly TBR, because I realized that I'd put myself forward to read a ton of books and I hadn't actually started any of them. So that's why I did that reading vlog. I'll link it in the cards and down below so you can go and check that out. But one of the books that I wanted to read was Unwind by Neil Shusterman, and I thought I would love this. It was a dystopian book. It was recommended to me like years and years ago now, like more than 5 years ago, by one of my tutors at uni, and I ended up going out and buying the first book and then the second and third and fourth all at once, and that was a bit of a mistake, because I ended up DNFing, which means did not finish. So I DNF'd Unwind at like page 46, I think. It had all of the makings of a book that I would really enjoy. It was a dystopian book, and it was about kids who, when they hit the age of 16, their parents could choose to get them unwound or to keep them, and it followed a couple of different varying perspectives. Couldn't get on board with the writing style. The way that Neil Shusterman had written it was in a weird kind of third person, and it made it hard for me to connect with the characters, and also the sentences were really choppy, or at least I felt they were. I know this series and Neil Shusterman as an author has a lot of people that love his work, so I'm probably one of those people that just unfortunately doesn't. That's really the extent of my thoughts. I wish I liked it. I think I predicted that I'd give it like a 3 stars when I did my try a chapter tag, and I think if I ended up finishing it, that's probably what I would have given it, but I just couldn't stick with the writing style, so it's now out there in the world for someone else to find and enjoy. I actually did the same thing with the next book that I'm going to talk about, and it is Half a King by Joe Abercrombie, except I did finish this one before I unhauled it, so I read that in my reading vlog as well. And this was a young adult fantasy book about a boy named Yavi, and Yavi only has one hand. He is set to be the priest in this world. He's kind of studying so that he doesn't have to become a prince, but in the first couple of pages, his brother and his father both die at sea, and he has to be the one that takes over the mantle of being king. And it kind of deals with the fallout of a betrayal and what what he has to do to save himself after that. And I thought I would enjoy it because I really like Joe Abercrombie's adult stuff. You can probably see it on the shelf behind me. I really like his At First Law series, but unfortunately I just couldn't get into it. I found Yavi to be fairly whiny, and I got frustrated that he kept reiterating that he only had one hand and he was the one-handed man and he was a cripple, and like, I get it. You can say it once or twice, you don't have to keep reiterating it. So I think I just didn't like his voice, and I think the plot, I'm used to a couple of things happening at the same time. Even if it's one character, it's usually got a multi-layered way of telling a story, but this was just very direct with Yavi's journey, I guess, for lack of a better word, and I wasn't interested in Yavi as a character, so therefore I wasn't interested in the book. I have since heard that the second book is really good and the third book is kind of so I think I did myself a service and I saved myself from reading those next two books in the series. Again, I wanted to like it, but it was just not something that I could get on board with, so someone else is going to find the series and hopefully like it more than I did. And then next I read Dark Age by Pierce Brown, and I have such mixed feelings. Well, this cover's very shiny. I have such mixed feelings with this series. I gave the first book 4.5 stars out of 5, and then Morning Star and Golden Sun, the third and second book in the series, I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Iron Gold was kind of a 4, maybe a 3.5, and then this one itself was like a 3.5 as well. The series hasn't gone downhill, but my expectation and enjoyment of the series has kind of taken a sharp right turn, I think. I'm not obviously going to say what this book is about because it will spoil the ending of Morning Star, and I wouldn't want to do that to anybody because I loved that book so much. The characters that you get in this, there are a few that are a throwback to the original trilogy, and then there are a few that are new characters, and I like the new characters enough to read about them, but I don't care about them in the same way that I cared about the characters in the original trilogy. They were very gripping to me, and the new characters just seemed to be supplementing what these gripping characters were. Every time I was interested in something that the plot did in this book, it was because a throwback to another character was mentioned, and that got my attention. That said, that was what the first 2/3 of the book was like for me, but at the ending part there are a few things that happened and I was like, this is amazing, this is what I wanted. There was a great scene with Lyria, who is one of the new characters in this book, near the end of this one, and I really enjoyed that. It had all the tension and the anger that was in the first trilogy, and that's what I like about this series, the fact that it's so raw like that, but the rest of it was kind of just character maneuvering and politics and stuff, and while that's interesting, I do like the stuff that's a little bit more raw and gritty as well. So for that reason, I gave it a 3.5. The half was bumped up at the end, but the rest of the book was about a 3. So I wanted to like it, like I said, but I don't know how I'm going to feel about the rest of this series. I know there's obviously more coming. I don't know if I'm going to be reading it immediately when it comes out. I don't want to write this series off and say I'm not going to enjoy anything after this. I'm not going to love the series. I want to stop at Morning Star. I'm not going to love these books because I like them and I like the characters, and I don't want to put down a series after I've read 5 books of it and put in all this effort. So I just really want to like this series. So I think I'm going to stick with it, but I'm not going to be an avid fan. I was an avid fan of the first trilogy, and I think that's where that is going to end. Giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Let me know if you've read this one in the comments. I want to see what your mixed kind of thoughts are and if they kind of match up with mine, or if I'm kind of crazy and this book was great and you just think I'm an idiot. Next up, I read The Test by Sylvain Neuvel, and he is also the writer of the Sleeping Giants books, which I really like. I talked about both of these, more so The Test, in my Contemporary-a-thon vlog. If you want to go and see what my thoughts were as I read this book, go and visit that vlog, but I ended up really enjoying this book. It is about a character named Adia, and he's sitting the British citizenship test, and while he's sitting this test, someone comes in with a gun and holds everybody hostage. There is more to the nuance of the story than that, but that is basically the premise, and if I say anything more about the premise, you're going to get a little bit spoiled by the mini twists as this little novella unfolds, so I don't want to spoil anything for you because I really enjoyed the little surprises in this, and I don't want to take that away from anyone else. I gave this book a 4.75 out of 5, so not quite a 5 and not quite a 4, because it's not like a new favourite book, but it's a book that I really respect and really like and would recommend to somebody else, and it was more enjoyable than a 4-star book. I don't really know how to explain my ratings like that to people because I got a question about that from my friend in my last YouTube video about how do I distinguish whether it's a 5-star book or a 4.75? What? Are you crazy? But I genuinely don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a feeling, and this feels like a 4.75 to me. It was very intense, and I treated this as kind of like a touch point on different social issues that we're facing today. So specifically racism is one of them, and then also humanity and making choices. I really loved that aspect of it and how based on the way we see other people, choices can be made for us, and that was one of the key elements to this story. And I think a lot more people should read this book because I actually found it really incredible and I would highly recommend it. I gave the test 4.75 out of 5 stars. Loved it, would recommend. Please pick it up if you like Sylvain Neuvel, even if you haven't read anything by him. So good. Next, I read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and this was on my priority list, so I'm so glad to say that I have crossed this off my priority list now. I gave this, I think, a 4 out of 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook and I liked it a lot more than I liked Circe. I liked it because there was more of a plot to this one than there was to Circe. So we follow the main character Patroclus when he's a kid, and he meets Achilles. So Patroclus accidentally does something and then gets exiled, and the palace that he goes to under exile is where he meets Achilles, and Achilles is the prince of this palace. So you get the dynamic of them growing up together and Patroclus and him becoming men and then falling in love, and it's such a beautiful, tragic story. And I didn't actually know the myth before I read the book, so certain things did surprise me as I was reading, and I was told that I was going to cry so much in this book, but that didn't happen. I did get a little bit upset and misty-eyed near the end or in the last page or so, but I didn't absolutely bawl my eyes out, thankfully, because I listened to this while I was catching the train to and from work. So I wouldn't want to be that person that is just sitting by herself with her headphones in crying on the train. As someone who likes mythology, I really enjoyed this book. I liked it more than Circe, and I'm glad that I read Circe first and this one second. I think some of the characterization changed a little bit closer to the end, and that's why I couldn't give it more than a 4, because I felt a little bit like, oh, that's different. But apart from that, no real criticism, and I liked this one. Okay, next I read a young adult book by an author that I've read from before, and I liked one of his books previously, but I read More Happy Than Not, and I talk about this in my Contemporary-a-thon vlog as well, because I read this for that readathon recently. I have mixed feelings about this book. I don't think I loved it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I wanted to like it more than I did, but I just couldn't get on board with the narration and the fact that the main character in this is really struggling, but nobody in the book seems to reach out to help him, and he doesn't reach out to help himself, which is to some sense realistic, but it was just really sad to see someone who needed to go to therapy and talk to someone completely reject that and bury themselves in their own kind of toxic masculinity, I guess. The main character in this book is named Aaron, and his father has recently committed suicide, but his family is too poor to move, so they're living in the same apartment that his father died, and he's also living in this really poor community as well, where all of his friends absolutely hate gay people and they often beat them up, and so he has internalized all of this, and even though he's gay himself, or he's figuring out that he's gay himself, he has all of these negative feelings towards that, and he also is very lost and doesn't really know what to do. And he runs into this character when he's playing a game with his friends, and this character becomes kind of the linchpin of his thoughts and love interest. And while all of this is going on, there's also this operation called the Latio effect. I can't pronounce it, I'll put it on the screen. And this operation in this book is not explained, which is very Adam Silvera. He often puts a little sci-fi element to his contemporary books so that it supplements the story a bit, and I don't really care that it wasn't explained because that's not really the gripe that I had with this book. I liked They Both Die at the End, and I gave that 5 out of 5 stars, and the sci-fi-ish element in that wasn't explained either, but I loved that book regardless. So if you're going to read from Adam Silvera, probably don't start with More Happy Than Not. Start with They Both Die at the End, because that was really good. I stayed up until like 2 a.m. reading that book. I have a spoiler-free review on my blog if you want to read about it. But the Latio operation. So that is an operation where the characters can basically wipe their mental slate clean and forget about their past, kind of like closing a door and then forgetting that the door exists and then starting your life fresh. But I just don't like the messages and the grief that this portrayed without much hope at all. I like my stories with a little bit of hope, and I think that's why I could only give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I was liking Aaron at the start, but by the end I just didn't really care for him. So that is my non-spoiler thoughts on this book. I can't really go into too much detail about why I didn't like certain things, but the thing I did like was the little plot twist closer to the end, but not the actual ending. So I liked pieces of this book, I just didn't like it as a whole, unfortunately. Next, I finished another book for Contemporary-a-thon, and it's the manga Fruits Basket, and this is volume 7. It is a manga series that's kind of contemporary, which is why I read it for the Contemporary-a-thon, but it also has a fantastical magical twist to it where certain characters, if they're hugged by a member of the opposite sex, they turn into an animal of the Chinese zodiac, and this is the Soma family curse, and Toru is the main character and she's living with this family, and so it kind of deals with that family and that family curse, and then Toru learning who everyone is, and it deals with such deep emotional things as well as lighthearted, silly things. And that's one of the reasons that this series is one of my favorites. It was one of the first mangas I ever read, and now I'm rereading it all again for like the first time in 10 years or something. I don't remember the ending, so that's why I'm rereading it. But this volume, particularly at the beginning, I wasn't really that interested. It followed one of the characters named Yuki, and I just didn't care about him being on the student council. And that kind of made up the main thrust of the beginning of this volume, but it got into the characters that I liked closer to the end of this volume. So I gave this like a 3.5 stars, I want to say. It touched on a few of the characters that I love, so hopefully in the next volume there will be those characters because it mentioned them briefly, so it'll dive into them in the next volume. But this series is very fluffy, it's very funny. It is kind of like romantic comedy manga, but also deeper and darker, like I said, in certain parts. I, again, only gave this 3.5 stars. I want to give it 4. I want to give all of the series 5 stars because I love these characters so much, but I just didn't really care for the plot in this. Characters I love, the plot in this one, not so much. So that's kind of my review for this. Next up is actually the last book that I read, and it is the last book in this reading wrap-up, and it's An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This follows our character April May, and she is a 23-year-old art student graduate living in New York City and trying to become a graphic designer and not really enjoying her life because it's kind of typical of an art student working so many hours and not getting paid for them as much as you'd like, and living in an apartment with her kind of housemate, kind of girlfriend Maya. And then one day she ends up walking past this art installation on the street, and she calls him Carl and makes a video about this statue with her friend Andy. And from that, she kind of accidentally goes viral because these statues have appeared worldwide in every major city. I don't want to say too much about what happens after that, but this really deals with social media and identity and marketing yourself and friendships and relationships behind that. And I liked that April May wasn't like a heroic character, I guess. She was very self-absorbed but also self-aware, and I think if she was only self-absorbed then I wouldn't have liked this book as much, because this really surprised me. I thought I was going to give this a 4 out of 5 stars, but I bumped it right up to a 5 out of 5 because I genuinely really enjoyed the trajectory of the character April May. I like who she was at the beginning, and I like who she became, and I like what happened at the end. And I can't say that about too many books that I've read recently. This book is definitely fully fledged one of my new favourite books. I really ended up loving it, and Hank Green has really surprised me. I started this in my Contemporary-a-thon vlog, but I finished it straight after the vlog finished because I just couldn't stop reading it. And I would be interested in picking up things that Hank Green writes in the future because this just blew me out of the water. It was very surprising, and it kind of crept up on me on how good it was. And I just want to recommend it to people so you know not to write it off just because it's by a YouTuber. If you're looking for things that are kind of cross-genre, then definitely try this one. I've been describing it as the more contemporary, hopeful version of Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel, which is kind of similar. Character finds a robotic thing and talks to the world about it, which is what happens in this book, and then character finds robotic thing and then grows up and becomes lead scientist investigating this thing, and that's what happens in Sleeping Giants. So they're kind of like the sci-fi version and then the contemporary-ish version of a similar premise, and I think that's a premise that I like, which is why I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars. And then as for what I'm currently reading, I am reading The Waking Fire by Anthony Ryan. I had this in my reading vlog as well, and I really liked what I saw of the world and the magic system, but I started the audiobook. I'm more than halfway through, so this should be in my next wrap up, so I'll talk about this more later. But I just wanted to mention it now so that you know what I'm currently reading after finishing Contemporary-a-thon. And then I don't know what audiobook to pick up next, so that is going to remain a mystery. But these are all the books that I have recently read. Let me know definitely if these are on your TBR or if you've read any of these as well. I would love to talk to you about them in the comments, but thank you so much for watching this video, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye.